Welcome back to PJ Takes 5. Today is Friday, September 12th, and Cubs legend Anthony Rizzo is officially retired. But we start today by talking about last night's NFL game where the Green Bay Packers won 27-18 against the visiting Washington Commanders. Starting with the Packers side of this, looking at their offense here, the one player that really stood out to me tonight was Tucker Kraft, tight end. Really good player. Might be their best receiving threat on that team. Finished with 6 catches for 124 yards and a touchdown. I've talked about on the show before. I just think having a mismatch kind of player at the tight end position is really helpful for a young quarterback, and we're lumping Jordan Love into that young quarterback tier, even though he's already on that second contract. But compared to some of the other guys in the NFL his age, doesn't have the reps that some of those guys have. So still kind of a young quarterback, but just have to have a crafty, no pun intended, tight end who can get over the middle of the field, be creative on the boundaries, match up well against linebackers, safeties. It's a really valuable piece of an offense to have, and it's a little concerning that that true wide receiver one hasn't really formed in that Packers group that's got a lot of talent, but relatively unheralded guys, including Matthew Golden, their first round pick this past season. But that's a group that's really led by Kraft, and I thought he really showed out. And then the other big player of notice for that Packers offense was Josh Jacobs, true bell cow back, a player we don't really see anymore in the NFL who can command 20 plus carries and run between the tackles very effectively. He ended with 84 yards and a touchdown on 23 carries. So that player that you can abuse in the early parts of the game, but then once you get a lead, you can lean on him even more. And as you get into the red zone, as you're trying to kill clock, a player that is just a really important part of the offense to have. And we're going to go through some NFL previews here in a little bit, and we're going to talk about how a lot of teams, especially with young quarterbacks, are struggling to find that consistent rushing attack. And to have a player like Jacobs in the backfield who is going to keep the defense honest and keep them in the box just to prevent him from running downhill, but it's also going to be a beast in the pass protection game and not let guys come in unscathed. It's a really important part of an offense, and like I said, one that a lot of NFL offenses don't have. So I look at those two guys. Obviously, Jordan Love is super important to that offense, but to have a dominant between the hash marks tight end like that who can get open and then be reliable in the passing game, and then a running back who can punish defenders in the run game, that's a really strong combination for those guys. So we saw them both finish with really productive nights, and Washington's defense didn't look amazing. We'll talk about them in a second here, but I think those two really kind of set the tone for the Packers and made it really hard for Washington to come in on defense and prevent that offense from doing what they want to do, which is run the ball and bootleg off of that. So really good stuff from them too. On the Packers defense side of the ball, you just got to look at that front seven, obviously headlined by the recent acquisition of Micah Parsons, but a group that finished with 4 sacks on Thursday night with a bunch of guys getting there. I think technically 6 players got involved because some of them had half sacks. So a stable of guys, Rashawn Gary, Micah Parsons, Lucas Van Ness, Devontae Wyatt, even the linebackers coming from the second level, all really physical and talented players who can make offensive lines struggle to line up and block them straight up. And if you get into the game of doing stunts and bring guys off blitzes and off different pressure looks, they're a group that can really cause even a good young quarterback like Jaden Daniels to hesitate and hold on to the ball and make his life even harder against them. And the Packers really totally dominated this game. The final score really wasn't even indicative of how much of a blowout it was at times, but like I said, those two players on offense and then that defensive front seven really making it difficult for Washington to come in and win. So going to the Commander side of this, starting with their offense, just looks super flat. Not really any way to go around that. With a young quarterback, you really want to complement him with a strong rushing attack, and obviously that was absent for the Commanders tonight. Again, a good defensive front that's hard to run against, and a group that when you're down, it's only harder to run the ball and commit to that running attack when you're down a couple scores, and only lets those guys tee off more when they know you're getting ready to pass the ball. But to see the best Jaden Daniels that we can see, you're going to have to get him involved in the rush game, but also have other players in that backfield capable of carrying the ball and keeping that defense honest so they can't drop a bunch of guys or spy Jaden. Just top to bottom, you need that run game. Obviously couldn't really score until garbage time. I know they had the 2 missed field goals, which really cut a lot of their offensive momentum to get into a scoring position and not come through with the points. That's really deflating for a group who just had a 40, 50, 60-yard drive, whatever, to get into that position and come away with nothing. But like I said, they had the touchdown late to make this game a little closer, but really only scored that 1 touchdown throughout the game in all reality. Looking at some of their players that I thought stood out, the Zach Ertz connection, I think is still really strong. Like I said, a tight end who's crafty over the middle. He's one of the more veteran players in the NFL, knows how to get open against linebacker safeties, and for him to be the kind of safety outlet for Jaden Daniels, I think has been super effective. They definitely need to get a little better on the O-line. big move in the offseason was adding Larry Tunsil on the left side, but we saw Micah Parsons and company really terrorize that right side, especially some of those younger guys. So that should get better throughout the year here, but it'll be paramount to make sure that Daniels has time to do what he needs to do in the pocket there, and then extend when he needs to and make plays with his legs like he definitely can, but keeping the defense honest and being a good passer first, and then when they do drop in man and no one's accounting for them, or when they're in zone and there's a space where a guy trails off and you can take off onto the boundary, that's how you have to do it. So gotta establish the run, gotta be able to protect Daniels within the pocket. And like I said, those 2 missed field goals are really tough. And then the Micah Parsons deal, they just didn't really have a plan for him, it felt like, which is a little concerning because they know him from his time in the NFC East, but obviously Dan Quinn being his defensive coordinator in Dallas there, so they should have had a little better plan for him. And then just 2 quick notes for this game. Why did the Packers use the all whites with the white helmet? That just feels like such a late November, December, potentially January in the playoffs type of situation, and to burn it September 11th. I mean, it's cool, I guess, to remember the tragedy if that's at all related to it, but it just felt like that was a uniform combination that would have done a lot better, week 16, 17, 18, whatever, when the Lions, the Bears, the Vikings are coming in, and it's one of those NFC North showdowns. So that was a little confusing. And then the Romeo Doubs helmet cap, the Guardian cap, I'm all for a player taking the extra step to protect himself and making sure that he can play a long time in the NFL because he is a really good player, but they have to do something to figure out how to make that a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, just because it's like wearing black socks. You just don't look very athletic when you're wearing that thing, and obviously he's putting his health above his appearance, which is ultimately the right thing to do and a decision many of us would make, but it just looks so unnatural when you see it out there. So that's all I have from Thursday night. We're going to head down to some NFL Week 2 preview here. So we're going to go through most of these games, just say one quick thing about each team. Starting in the early slate, we got the Jaguars at Cincinnati. I thought the Jaguars offense looked really strong last week, obviously against what's probably going to end up being one of the worst defenses in the NFL in Carolina, but Travis Etienne really won that running back 1 gig and set up for the breakout year that we've been expecting over the past couple seasons here. 156 total yards, and they ended up trading Tank Bigsby to the Eagles there, so it looks like he's going to be that running back going forward. And then with Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter combining for just 44 yards against Carolina, you got to get those guys a little bit faster into the pass game. I know they have Shane Waldron as their OC, who Bears fans know pretty well, but you got to find a way to get those 2 really talented receivers open. For Cincinnati, winning last week 17-16 against Cleveland, finally starting a season with a win, not playing catch up within your division the entire year. That was a really tough game, and people are kind of disappointed with that score for them, but that's a tough team that in Cleveland that doesn't have a lot of talent, but plays a lot of things the right way and played them really tough, obviously. So another team that needs more of the run game. Chase Brown had 43 yards and a touchdown on 21 carries and was the only running back to record a carry. But the passing attack should pick up here a little bit. Like I said, Cleveland's a really good team. Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome out there in the secondary. And I think the addition of Noah Fant for that Bengals receiving group is really going to be helpful. He had 4 receptions for 26 yards and a touchdown, and was a really late offseason addition for them. So have kind of rounded out that pass catcher group, even with Mike Gesicki still in there at tight end. Heading down to Giants-Cowboys here. New York really got to look to replace Russell Wilson, but the schedule makes it pretty impossible. Dallas this week, and then KC, Los Angeles Chargers. The Saints could be the option in week 5 there. Then you got the Eagles, Denver, Eagles again, Niners, Chicago, Green Bay, Detroit. I know a lot of people say the bye week is usually a time to try to bring in a quarterback, but that's week 14, super late. So it's going to have to happen at some point here because some of those guys seem to be checking out. Russell Wilson, obviously, Malik Neighbors at the top of that list, and I think Jackson Dart is a player that you'd want to see pretty soon here of what he can do. But like I said, it's probably not going to be against Dallas, probably not going to be against KC or the Chargers, but maybe that Saints game is where we start to see Dart here coming in a little bit. And then for Dallas, I thought they looked really good last week against Philadelphia. Didn't come out with the win and obviously benefited from Jalen Carter not playing that game due to ejection. But they'll need a little more out of CeeDee Lamb. We all saw a couple of tough drops at the end of that game. Just a really good player who is a receiver 1 in the NFL and needs to be able to make plays like that consistently. And the running game, obviously, a lot of positives against Philadelphia. Got to continue to work on that against what's a pretty good defensive line group for New York. So they had 2 touchdowns and 106 yards from the running backs last week. Hopefully they can try to look to recreate that against the Giants there. Here we got Bears at Lions. Bears, we didn't talk about it, but played pretty well Monday night. Obviously collapsed in the fourth quarter. Need to do a better job of establishing that run like I've been talking about. 53 yards from DeAndre Swift isn't going to be enough, and Caleb ended up as the team's leading rusher, and he's not necessarily the mobile quarterback that you'd see like Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson. So that's kind of a miss schematically, and Ben Johnson going against his old team, the most should have run the ball a little bit, and obviously you got to take care of Aiden Hutchinson, who's one of the best defensive ends in the NFL and can truly be a game wrecker for that Bears offense. For the Lions side, I know they took that tough loss in week 1 against the Packers. I'm really not too concerned about that. Obviously, turning over both their coordinators is going to take a little bit of time to get back to where they were. A couple weeks, you got to give it a little bit of patience. I trust in Dan Campbell, and I still think that's a super talented roster. The interior of the offensive line, I think, is a little bit a problem. The past 2 seasons, they've had really strong offensive lines with Penei Sewell and Taylor Decker at the bookend tackle spots really leading the way. But you have a rookie in there, Tate Ratledge, who really struggled last week, and it's just going to take some time for that interior group to figure it out, which is so important for a pocket passer like Jared Goff to have the protection in the middle there. So I really believe in the Lions. Obviously, hope that they lose this week to the Bears, and hope it's at least a little bit better offensively for the Bears with Ben Johnson trying to get some revenge against his old team. Going down to Rams at Titans. Rams, they're kind of in that spot where they're transitioning to a defensive team. Have had a lot of great offensive players over the past decade or so. Todd Gurley way back, but then Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Stafford and Nacua are still there, obviously. But that defensive line front 7 is just so powerful and really talented, and probably pretty comparable to what we've seen out of Denver, who played the Titans last week. So they should be able to get after Cam Ward this week for the Rams. And like I said, I'm really excited about that Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams wide receiver tandem. I talked about them as the breakout 1-2 punch in the NFL this year, and we saw a little bit of that from Nacua, but Adams had a relatively quieter day last week. So I'd like to see them get going against a relatively weaker Titans secondary. And then on the Titans side, I know Ward didn't put up a bunch of big numbers in his debut and ended up losing that game, but I thought he looked pretty good, all things considered. That O-line really didn't hold up too well, and there were some drops around him, and there's already not a lot of talent in that wide receiver tight end group. But at the end of the day, he had his team within a possession of beating the Broncos and didn't turn the ball over. So they play the Rams, who I think are a really good team, and then the schedule kind of cools off. Colts, Texans, Cardinals, Raiders, Patriots, Colts again. So they might start 0-2, but I think there's some wins baked in there. It might not be a situation where the Titans are picking number 1 overall again next year, and they can get some wins out of Cam Ward here, who seems to be doing all the little things right as a first-year NFL quarterback. Patriots at Dolphins. Side of it, Drake May kind of still yet to arrive. He had 287 yards last week, relatively good game, but it took him 46 attempts to get there. So you just want to see that kind of efficiency within the passing game and not needing to throw the ball a million times to get some production. But again, our team doesn't have a lot of offensive talent. Trayvon Henderson's there. I think he's a good back, but same thing where if the defense doesn't respect the passing game, they're going to key in on the run, and then it doesn't really help anybody between May or Henderson. So, want to see more from the offense, and then defensively, they're still in that rebuilding spot. I think they're going to be without cornerback Christian Gonzalez again this week, who I'm a really big fan of, but that defense is really in an overhaul and trying to get guys coming in to do the little things the right way that Vrabel sees. But overall, are not super talented roster, but they're playing one of the weaker teams so far in the NFL this week in Miami, who looked really bad in week 1. No way to sugarcoat it. Defense couldn't get a single stop against the Colts there, which is the first time that's happened this century, essentially. And the offense is already kind of falling apart. The Tyreek Hill drama, I think he has an off-the-field situation already, but seems to not be particularly bought into that offense and the Tua Tagovailoa experience. So would this team fire Mike McDaniel midseason and try to find something? Would they shut down Tua for health concerns in order to tank a little bit? Maybe one or the other, probably not both. Because if you fire McDaniel, you're probably trying to get a little bit of a bump, so Tua would still be in there probably. But I see these two teams, the Patriots and the Dolphins, fighting for that 4th place spot in the AFC East. Heading down here to 49ers at Saints. 49ers already dealing with a bunch of injuries. Mac Jones is a question mark. George Kittle is already on IR, but they're going to become a team that's really led by that defensive group. Robert Saleh coming back as a D coordinator after some runs in the Super Bowl there, I think it's going to be super helpful, even after losing key contributors like Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. Again, a group that is very veteran, and we'll see what it looks like this week if Mac Jones does have to play with a limited skill set of receivers around him. But definitely on paper a better team than the Saints, who I think they're a little bit of a mess. You draft Tyler Shuck in the 2nd round, and he can't beat out Spencer Rattler, who I get you have as a prospect type of quarterback that you want to see what you have there. But is Shuck worse than Rattler is right now? And Rattler's already one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. Not to bash him, but just the reality of the situation. I think this is a team that's going to end up with one of the worst records in the NFL, and I'm a little bit skeptical of what the plan is for them this season and beyond with that quarterback situation and having a bunch of older players. Alvin Kamara is out there, not getting any younger. It could be a trade target throughout the season. Chris Olave is a good player who keeps getting hurt. Even some of the defensive pieces are just on the back end of the career. So they're a not good team that doesn't have a core young group of guys to build around. So definitely not a good situation for them. Another AFC East battle, we got the Bills up at the New York Jets. Buffalo, obviously the 41-40 win against Baltimore last weekend. They're super good. Should be one of the Super Bowl favorites. We saw both Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid have really strong games at home in week 1 there, breaking out after being back-to-back first-round selections. And you just got to think Josh with actual young weapons who he can grow with and usher along the way is a super dangerous thing for that offense. On the Jets side, I thought they had a really great week 1, probably one of the surprise teams in the NFL. Ran the ball super effectively with and without Justin Fields. 27 carries by running backs for 134 yards and a touchdown, and then Fields himself tacked on 48 yards on 12 rushes and 2 touchdowns. So another example of the passing just being a lot easier when the running game is going. And then looking at the first-round pick, Armand Membu out of Missouri, I thought he had a monster game against TJ Watt, which is no easy task. So I really like what they're got going on there in New York. I have all summer, really, and I think they're building that team the right way. Seahawks at Steelers here. Seahawks and their team that has a lot of offensive questions. Who's the lead running back? Is it Zach Charbonnet or Kenneth Walker? Charbonnet ended up with 2 more carries and 27 more yards and the only touchdown of that game for the Seahawks. I thought Jackson Smith and Jigba had a really big game, but that number 2 pass catcher is still a huge question mark even after signing Cooper Kupp this offseason. So the offense looked pretty good and the defense looked pretty good, and they're building that team the right way again there, but definitely some questions surrounding Sam Darnold in terms of offensive weaponry for him to work with after signing that big free agent deal. And then for the Steelers, Rodgers seems to be back. That week 1 game against the Jets, obviously a revenge game for him, and he takes that stuff pretty seriously, it feels like, but back to being a really creative passer and getting in the space and hitting open balls. Really good use of 2 tight end sets between Johnny Smith and Pat Freiermuth, and then we saw Calvin Austin kind of emerge as that wide receiver 2 opposite of DK Metcalf. So another team need more out of the run game. I don't love their running back group between Jalen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, and Caleb Johnson's in there, but they didn't really use him in week 1. Probably looks to be that guy who takes over that running back 1 position at some point, maybe not this year, but to not have a real physical downhill player, and obviously you got rid of Najee Harris this offseason, it's a little concerning with a veteran quarterback to not have that downhill presence. Browns at Ravens. Cleveland, again, a team that doesn't have a ton of talent, but I think they're really well coached by Stefanski out there. The defense is super strong with Myles Garrett leading the way and Denzel Ward, like we talked about. And those 2 do a lot of the heavy lifting. I expect this game to be relatively close and low scoring, kind of just that classic AFC North battle between 2 teams here, and I hope the Ravens don't overlook them. But the Ravens, they lost another funky game against the Bills. Obviously a really good team still, but just don't overlook this team. The defense had their hands full last week against Josh. And they should be able to do a lot better against Joe Flacco and the Browns here, but I want to see a little more out of Kyle Hamilton. He was my Defensive Player of the Year pick before the season, almost blocked the game-winning kick last week, but I want to see him get a little more involved with the pass game, the run game, getting after the passer, all these different things that he can do that makes him a really versatile player on the back end there. Going to some midday games here, we got the Colts and the Broncos facing off in Indianapolis. Bo Nix, a little bit overrated heading into the season, in my opinion. Looked to take a step back in week 1 there, throwing the 2 picks against Tennessee there, who I don't think is a particularly good secondary. RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins look to be a really good 1-2 punch at that running back position, but just need more from Nix, and the defense is really strong too. So if Nix can play, even just game management football, but especially if he's making plays in the passing game, I think that's a really dangerous team still. Indy, I know the Jets had a really good week 1, but they might have won week 1 there in Indianapolis. Daniel Jones looked really good. Can he stay productive like that against a much better defense than he saw against Miami? Obviously, the Broncos have one of the more talented defensive groups in the NFL, so it'll be a good test for him to see if last week was fool's gold or if he actually has something of a career resurgence going on in Indy here with Shane Steichen. Panthers at Cardinals. Panthers, like I said, defense still has a lot of holes, 378 total yards allowed. Offense took a big step back, even with some new pieces there, adding Ted McMillan and getting that receiver room overhauled a little bit and adding some new running backs. So Bryce Young, 3 total turnovers with 2 picks and a fumble loss. Might just need to get some adjusting to, knowing your new weapons and where they're going to be and how they play and how you can lean on them, but definitely a little bit concerning after we saw a good end of the season stretch last season for the Panthers offense. And for the Cardinals, a team that I still don't really understand what their identity is on either side of the ball. They could very easily start 2-0, but be one of the worst teams on the year at the end of the season. little to no offensive identity outside of Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. trying to get up and going, but I don't really trust Kyler Murray too much, and that running back room is a little confusing to me, where I think they should lean a little more on Trey Benson just because he's probably the running back of the future for them, and the defense is just kind of unnoteworthy overall for me. Some good secondary players, obviously with Budda Baker leading the way there, but that front seven in general just leaves a lot of question marks of who's getting after the passer consistently, who's able to stop the run, so this might be a little bit of an ugly game overall. You probably won't be watching it because at the same time we have Eagles at Chiefs. Obviously, the Super Bowl rematch. These teams have played actually twice in the Super Bowl in recent years. Eagles defense will have to be a lot better, even with Worthy out. Still a scary offensive group with Mahomes and Kelsey, with their connection and everything they're able to do. But for the Eagles, I thought their passing game offensively was really a little strange. In week 1 there against the Cowboys, Dallas Goedert had a good game, but couldn't really get A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith involved from that wide receiver 1 and 2 position. It might just be a game plan thing where they were trying to focus on the run game and short passes against a Dallas defense that has good secondary players, but really, on paper, at least struggles in the front seven. But the KC defensive backs might allow a little bit more in terms of big plays, so hopefully the Eagles can get their passing attack going a little stronger here. And then for the Chiefs, last week's game against the Chargers was really setting up to be one of those games where the Chiefs just find a way to win, and they didn't, so it might be a little bit of a signal that things are kind of changing for them. I know the Patriots were a similar team where they had a big dynasty and then had to take some wounds there and then came back on the other side as another 2 of the dynasty. So we might be at that part for the Chiefs where they have to reconfigure their roster a little bit and figure out how to surround Mahomes with better talent on a team overall, outside of just having Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey and a good offensive line and just hoping the defense comes together. So I think they're just in a little bit of the transition, but they could definitely win this game on Sunday. And then going down to the Sunday Night Football game here, we got Falcons at Vikings. Atlanta, I thought, looked really good in week 1, and then came out with the win after missing the game-tying field goal. But so many different playmakers on the offense. Bijan Robinson had the big catch-and-run touchdown, but Drake London, Kyle Pitts, even Darnell Mooney when healthy. There's a lot of really good players to like on the offense. Defensively, I'd like to see a little more, especially from James Pierce Jr., their first-round pick last season. I don't think he recorded a single stat last week, so trying to get him involved in rushing the passer would really help out that group. And the Vikings, you talked about them already a little bit, played really well in that fourth quarter against the Bears. J.J. McCarthy really settled in after that pick 6. I think for them defensively, look at trying to get after Michael Penix Jr. in a real way where you make his night super uncomfortable, kind of like they did to Caleb last weekend. But look for the offense under McCarthy in a second start at home to take another step, especially if that requires getting Justin Jefferson a little bit more involved, who he scored last week but had a relatively pedestrian outing for his standards. And then I will say here, I'm not going to do a Monday Night Football preview. I'll talk about more about that later, but as of right now, we're only going to review Monday and Thursday night games the following day. So I'm heading down this college football week 3 preview. We'll go even faster through some of these games, but Friday we got Colorado at Houston. Coach Deion Sanders is kind of on my hot seat. Just needs to be a better head coach. I don't really trust this team, especially on the road. So I wouldn't be surprised if they took the L there. Kansas State at Arizona. Possible get right for Kansas State after a 1-2 start. Took L's to Iowa State and Navy, and also barely beat North Coast. So they have a lot to prove still against a Power 4 conference team. And then the last game there, UNM taking on UCLA. UCLA favored by over 2 touchdowns, but I think UNM is a really competitive non-Power 4 conference team. Held Michigan pretty close. And you look at the other side, UCLA looked really bad in their first game against BYU. So this could be a game that UNM pulls off the win. I wouldn't be that surprised. Heading down to Saturday, early slate, number 4 Oregon going up to Northwestern. Oregon's going to blow these guys out. I think this is a really weird spot for them to host Big Noon kickoff. This isn't going to be even close to a contest. Number 12, Clemson at Georgia Tech. Big get-right spot for Clemson after a tight loss to LSU in that Week 1 game, who is one of the best teams in the nation, but then only narrowly beating Troy the week after. So they should go into Georgia Tech and kind of roll those dudes and get back to their ways here. And then Wisconsin at number 19, Alabama. Alabama should win this game, but if they do lose or it's really close, this could be the nail in the coffin for Kalen DeBoer's tenure as the Crimson Tide head coach. Midday games, we got number 6 UGA taking on number 15 Tennessee on the road. This is the college game day game. Much better pick than the Big Noon Fox kickoff. UGA is on upset alert here against a really good offense led by Joey Aguilar. UGA defense, not what it's been in recent years. I would not be surprised if Tennessee won this game. USC going to Purdue. I just think this is a super gross thing that this is a Big Ten game. Two teams that I can't even picture showing the field, really. I would think that USC would roll. Purdue's not very good right now, but if they don't win that game, that USC program might be in a little bit of trouble. Pitt at West Virginia, the backyard brawl. West Virginia's won 4 of the last 6, but since they renewed this in 2022, West Virginia's won 2 of the last 3, so a back-and-forth rivalry. These teams do not like each other. This should be a fun game. And then 18 USF taking on number 5 Miami in Miami. USF can still make the college football playoffs even if they lose this game against one of the better teams in the country. Miami's defense is very, very good with Reuben Bain Jr. there at defensive end especially, so I'd be very surprised if this is a high-scoring game for USF or if they're able to stay in this game for too long. Going to the evening of Saturday, Arkansas at number 17 Ole Miss. Ole Miss trying to break into that top level of the SEC, but their schedule is pretty insane here. They have not in a row, but coming up, LSU, UGA, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Florida, Mississippi State, all really good teams, all teams that should be able to give them a run for their money. So we'll see if Lane Kiffin can kind of break into that top end of the SEC. Florida at number 3, LSU. If LSU really embarrasses these guys, this could be the end of Billy Napier. We saw the AD come out with a statement of support for Napier after week 2, which is never a good sign that early in the season. So he's a little bit on hot seat alert here. 16 Texas A&M at number 8 Notre Dame. Notre Dame needs to win this game to make the playoffs. If there are 2 losses in the first 2 weeks after having a bye week between them, that would be a really bad start to the season. Offense looked good versus Miami defense, I thought, all things considered. But can the defense shut down Marcel Reed? He leads the Aggies in passing and rushing yards, 8 total touchdowns already, kind of putting together a quiet Heisman candidacy that I think would really take off if they could win this game at Notre Dame. Vandy at number 11, South Carolina. Just a really good quarterback matchup between Diego Pavia and Lenore Sellers. Play the game a little differently, but this should be a really premier quarterback matchup between 2 really talented SEC players. And then 2 night games real quick. Minnesota at Cal. Cal has looked pretty rough, but this is Minnesota's first game against a Power 4 team, so it should be interesting to see where they stack up against one of the worst Power 4 teams in the country, and I think people consider Minnesota to be in that tier as well, so this, could be near the end of the PJ Fleck experience for them. And then BC at Stanford's the last game here. Stanford has just been awful this year. BC did lose to Michigan State, who's another really tough team, so this one might be a game that you're watching, kind of like the last one, where you're trying to see how bad it looks, but 2 relatively evenly matched teams. So going on down to some Cubs notes here, obviously a little bit less Cubs talk, just with football starting up here, but just wanted to say they beat the Braves 2-1 in that 3-game series in Atlanta, faced the Rays for a 3-game series in Chicago starting Friday. They have 5 series left: the Rays, the Pirates, the Reds, the Mets, and the Cardinals. 8th easiest schedule remaining, 5.5 games back of the Brewers in the NL Central, 4-game lead for the first wild card spot. Ahead of the Padres, 7-game lead for the final wild card spot ahead of the Mets. They're currently set to face the Padres in a 3-game series with home field advantage. Would be a super competitive matchup. Padres obviously a really strong team as well. And it's important to note that whoever gets that home field advantage for that 3-game series plays all 3 games at home. So having a 3-game stand at Wrigley Field will be huge against the Padres. Just wanted to single out one player here, Cade Horton, now the odd-on favorite for NL Rookie of the Year. His last 4 starts, 3-1 record, 13 hits allowed, 3 ERA, 19 Ks, and just 1 homer and 22.1 innings pitched. Would be the 2nd consecutive NL Central pitcher to win the Rookie of the Year award, obviously after Paul Skeens has put together a really strong resume, especially after the All-Star break. So at this point, you'd almost be surprised if it went anywhere else, and it kind of all goes back to having Jacob Misiorowski play in the All-Star game as a pitcher for the Brewers, and he is a good player, but really doesn't have anywhere near the resume that Horton has at this point in time. And then as a team, just the offense has really improved here. 5+ team hits in 16 of the last 18 games, which goes back to that start of that Dodgers series. In the 18 games before that, 13 such games with 5+ hits. So they've been hitting the ball much more consistently. And then looking at those spans, 3+ runs in 14 of the last 18 games compared to 9 of the 18 before that. So the hits are coming in, the runs are coming in. We're kind of past that slump a little bit. Obviously, some players are still feeling to live up to their individual expectations a little bit, but as a team, the offense is coming through. And then the big Cubs news, we teased at the top of the show, Anthony Rizzo announcing his retirement. Will retire as a Cub with a pregame on-field ceremony this Saturday. Should be super exciting just to go to that game or be in that area. I'm set to join the Cubs as an ambassador after spending 9.5 of his 14 career seasons with the team, with the Cubs, 3-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glove winner, 1-time Silver Slugger. Led team to 3 straight NLCS appearances, including obviously the World Series championship in 2016. In franchise history, his 242 Cubs homers is 6th most, 538 extra base hits is the 10th most, and his 165 hits by pitches ranks 1st most in Cubs history, which obviously not a stat you're really going for, but just a fun thing that matches the meatball Italian, big-time first baseman vibe that he portrayed so well. So the really cool thing with him, super well known for his time off the field working with pediatric cancer patients in that community in general. I'm sure we all know, but he had and overcame Hodgkin's lymphoma in 2008 at the age of 19. Won the Roberto Clemente Award, which is kind of the Walter Payton Man of the Year award for his work with the community as a Cub. Just a super cool story of a guy who overcame so much and was able to follow his dreams and achieve them, and then give back to some of those guys, some of those young kids in a really meaningful way. So always going to be a super cool part of who he is and a really meaningful reason of why he's so well liked in the baseball community, but even the people tangentially related to it. So can't say enough really cool stuff about him and all the work he does. And I would just say he might not end up having his number retired. I know nobody's worn 44 since he's been around, but I think he's definitely a statue out there with all the other legends, probably of him catching that last ball in the World Series and putting both his hands above his head. So obviously an all-time Cub, a player who's a huge part of that 2016 World Series team, a huge fan favorite player, and a guy that is going to be super exciting to see back at Wrigley this weekend, but just there as an ambassador for the team moving forward. So heading on down here, we're going to wrap it up with the over-under favorite dogs. First week went 0-4 only on college games. That was pretty rough, but last week we went 3-4 in both NFL and college, so definitely a big step up. We were 6-8 on the weekend, so we're up to 6-12 on the year. 50% will take that. So starting with the NFL picks, my over is the Falcons at Vikings, going over 44.5. A lot of offensive talent on both these teams, and Minnesota's got a really good defense, but Atlanta's defense is still trying to figure it out. So 2 young quarterbacks looking to one-up each other, a bunch of good receivers, good running backs. I think this could be a really offensive explosion on Sunday Night Football. My under, I got the Rams at Titans going under 41.5. Titans, Cam Ward's really good, but he doesn't have a lot to work with. I think the Rams are really just going to stifle that offense and not let them do too much in the pass or run game. My favorite, I know we didn't talk about this game on Monday night, but I have the Chargers -3.5 against the Raiders. Chargers look so good against the Chiefs, and the Raiders are a good team, still trying to figure some stuff out. So even going on the road, I have the Chargers winning by at least 4. And then my dog, another Monday Night Football game that we didn't talk about, but Bucs +2.5 against Houston. I really don't trust the Texans that much, and I think the Bucs are a really good team and know how to win close games like they did a week ago against Atlanta. So those are my NFL picks. And then going on the college football here, my over UJ at Tennessee going over 49.5. Again, I think Tennessee is just a really good offense, and UJ has some good offensive pieces, but neither of these teams really have the best defense out there. So I could see this being a little bit of a shootout in Tennessee. Under USF at Miami going under 57.5. Again, Miami just great defense, especially with the D-line paying their ears back and going after quarterbacks. I think USF has shown a lot in the first 2 weeks, but I could see them Hurricane defense really just messing up their day and not allowing a lot of points or yards either way. My favorite, I have LSU -7.5 plus Florida. Florida, a team that's faltering, and LSU is proving to be one of the best teams in the country, and Garrett Nussmeier, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So I think they'll take care of Florida pretty easily on the road. And then my dog of the week, I have Texas A&M +6.5 against Notre Dame. I actually think Notre Dame wins this game at home. It's probably a field goal game or a 4-point game. So I think A&M loses, but keeps it within the number, probably being a little more dynamic than Notre Dame is offensively. And Notre Dame's defense maybe isn't what it was last year or in recent seasons, but this could be a pretty good quarterback matchup with CJ Carr for Notre Dame, proving again that he's actually a pretty good solid quarterback that they picked up. So those are my picks this weekend. Again, hope to kind of flutter around that 500 or better record. Quick show note, I know we're recording this on Thursday right now, going to go out Friday. Schedule changed here a little bit where I have stuff Friday morning and Thursday during the day and at night. So we might change the schedule a little bit to Monday and Thursday releases, but we'll cross the bridge when we get there. And if the episodes come out on different days, you'll see it, pretty quickly. So that's all I have. Thanks for watching, and hopefully it's a good weekend of football, and I'll talk about it early next week. So peace.